Hello, I'm Rod Peppiatt from the Uniting Church in Blackburn, Victoria, the Avenue Uniting Church, meeting on the lands of the Wurundjeri peoples of the Kulin Nations. Welcome to you as we continue deeper into the season of creation, a time when churches and people of faith focus our attention on the world and the universe around us. To help in that, I'm going to read two readings today, one from a psalm and one which is a contemporary reading. From Psalm 139, verses 7 onwards. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle at the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light around me become night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as the day, for darkness is as light to you. How weighty to me are your thoughts, O God, how vast the sum of them. I try to count them, they are more than the sand. I come to the end, and I am still with you. And then a contemporary reading by Alain-René Bozarth, called The Small Plot of Ground. The small plot of ground on which you were born cannot be expected to stay the same forever. Earth changes and home becomes different places. You took flesh from clay, but the clay did not come from just one place. To feel alive, important and safe, know your own waters and hills, but no more. You have stars in your bones and oceans in blood. You have opposing terrain in each eye. You belong to the land and the sky of your first cry. You belong to infinity. Today our focus is on what I'm calling Land Sunday. When we reflect on our relationships to land. Here in Australia, the Indigenous people talk about walking on country or the relationship to country. And that's deeply central, fundamental to who they are as people. I am tempted to say that other Australians don't have that same kind of connection. Or rather, I would have said that years ago. I'm not sure it's true anymore. There's a different relationship to land for certain. But I know for me, my relationship to certain parts of this country, Australia, is very deep. And as I flew home recently from 2 months in the United States, there was a sense of coming back to my land. To my home. I'm going to share with you a story. It's a story that invites us into reflection on our relationship and the way we treat the land around us. It's a folk story from Taiwan, in fact, and it's adapted by Glynis Goins, and I want to read it to you. Once upon a time, aren't they great words? Once upon a time there was a small village that nestled at the foot of a mountain. One day an old man came to the village. He had a long white beard that gleamed in the sun, but his clothing was faded and tattered. He was selling delicious cakes, and he was carrying a heavy load of them wrapped in paper. The smell of the cakes was delicious, and the villagers streamed out of their huts to see what the old man was selling. "Sweet cakes for sale," he cried. "Delicious sweet cakes for sale. 1 for 10 cents, 2 for 20 cents, and 3 for free." "What?" the villagers called out. "He's nuts." They whispered among themselves, "Sweet cakes, 3 for free. Something's wrong here." But no, again, "Sweet cakes for sale," cried the old man. "Delicious sweet cakes for sale. 1 for 10 cents, 2 for 20 cents, and 3 for free." More and more villagers gathered around, whispering to each other, "That can't be true. There must be a trick." Then a chubby young boy stepped forward. "I don't care," he said. "I'll eat 3 of the cakes and we'll soon see if they're free or not." So he held out his hands for the cakes. They were huge and sticky and delicious. He stuffed the first one into his mouth and munched away. Yum, yum. He mumbled through the crumbs in his mouth. "This is the most delicious cake I've ever eaten." And he began to shove the second cake in his mouth as a trickle of saliva ran down his chin. The cakes were enormous. After eating 2, he had eaten more than enough, and his stomach was full. But he looked at the old man and asked, "Well, if I eat 3, I don't have to pay anything, is that right?" "That's right," said the old man. "I never tell lies." So the boy took a 3rd cake and he stuffed it in his mouth so he wouldn't have to pay for them, even though he was beginning to feel quite sick in his stomach. He dropped the papers that they had been wrapped in onto the ground. When the rest of the village saw that the old man had kept his promise, they pushed and they shoved to get to the front so they could also get their share of the cakes for free. Each one of them came forward and asked for 3 cakes so they wouldn't have to pay for them, even though they knew 3 was actually more than they could eat. Eventually, the old man's basket was empty and he returned home. Those villagers who had come too late grumbled and groaned and moaned about missing out on the free cakes. It happened again the next day, and the day after that, and in fact for 10 days in a row. The old man came to the village calling out again and again, "Sweet cakes for sale, delicious sweet cakes. 1 for 10 cents, 2 for 20 cents, and 3 for free." The villagers continued to stuff themselves every day with 3 cakes so they wouldn't have to pay for them, even though they were too full. And some of them had had stomachache from eating too many cakes. The pile of cake papers grew bigger and bigger. On the 10th day, the villagers were once again shoveling the cakes into their mouths when a little girl came up to the old man and touched his arm. "Please, mister, could you give me one of your cakes?" she asked shyly, and held out her 10 cents. The villagers stared at her and shook their heads in amazement. What a stupid kid to pay for something when she could have 3 times as much for nothing. The old man smiled at her and he bent down to look deep into her eyes. "Young girl," he said, "did you hear me clearly? 1 for 10 cents, 2 for 20 cents, and 3 was free. Why would you only want 1 cake when you have 3 that you can get for nothing?" The little girl smiled back and said, "Well, I understand about the free cakes if you have 3. but I've watched you carry your heavy load of cakes to our village every day, and every time you've made no money and you've gone home empty-handed, and I'm so sorry. I really want to help you, but I only have enough money to pay for one cake." When they heard the girl's words, the villagers blushed and hid their heads in shame. "At last," said the old man, "I've found the right person to be my pupil. I am the spirit of the mountain behind your village." Everyone turned to look at the mountain, and for the first time they noticed that half the mountain was missing. The old man had been testing their hearts by using the soil from the mountain to make sweet cakes to sell, and the villagers had already eaten a huge chunk of the mountain, leaving an ugly, jagged hole in its side. The old man took the young girl home with him to teach her the ways of the earth and to pass on to her his special skills as the spirit of the mountain. For she was indeed gentle-hearted and willing to learn the lessons that needed to be learned. Amen.